Well, hello. Welcome back into the 460 Street Racers Heroes and Legends podcast. Once again, my name is Dalton Stevens. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Guys, today we're sitting down once again with Mr. Kelly Conley. He's been a fixture in all of these episodes we've done so far, so Kelly's going to hang over here with us. And today, guys, our guests are going to be Greg and Rocky Rowland, the Rowland Brothers. They were kind enough to drive up here from South Carolina earlier today to sit down and talk with us about the 460 Street Racers and their time racing in 460 and a couple other things. They've also raced at Combs. They've raced down here. They've had a good time getting around up here in Eastern Kentucky. So joining us over here next to me is going to be Mr. Beecher Frazier again. Beecher, how you doing today?
I'm fine, buddy.
Beecher's doing just fine.
I've just been waiting on this.
We got him a T-shirt over here, Arm Drop Garage T-shirt. What do you got? Yeah, he's got a big KRF Arm Drop Dragz T-shirt on. Beecher's repping the brand. So Gina's over here to my right. We got Andrew just right outside of frame here watching everything today. So, guys, we're going to dive right into it here. We're going to get to talking. Kelly's excited. He's over there tapping. He forgets that microphone every time he taps on it. It's real good and loud. He just, look at it.
He's anxious.
He's ready to go. This is the second podcast today, so you guys just got done watching his podcast with Kelly and Pooh Bear there just earlier. So hopefully you're back here checking this one out with the Rowland Brothers. But we're going to dive right into it here. The Rowland Brothers, just to give them a little bit of background, and they're going to elaborate a little bit further. They had actually came along to the 460 Street Racers after Kelly had kind of moved around and was kind of off doing different things at that time. So these guys are going to be able to give us a slightly different perspective as opposed to, what Kelly gave us and what everybody else has been able to give us so far. So it's going to be interesting to hear their stories. So, Rocky, Greg, appreciate you guys coming up and hanging out with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Just do me a favor. Tell us, how did you boys get started with the 460 Street Racers? Are you guys, first of all, I guess, are you guys originally from Eastern Kentucky?
Yes. Born and raised in Paintsville.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, just tell us how you guys, kind of came up and how'd you get into racing, and then ultimately how'd you get to 460?
Same story, man. Same as a lot of the guys that have been on here. We grew up. It's rural around here. We started on four-wheelers, not so much dirt bikes, but we, started out riding four-wheelers just all over the county, just out exploring. You want to go faster. It's a natural progression. And then our uncle, who was a mechanic in one of the local facilities, he had a 69 Chevelle, and he took it to Clay City and drag raced, and he knew all these guys growing up and worked on some of their cars and stuff like that. So we heard these stories, as kids about all this racing that was going on. We saw the hot rod. We got to live it. We got to be around it. We helped with I think they let me set the tire pressure when I was 12 years old on the race car. So we were at the track. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I was real good, he'd let me get in and start it up. Warm the motor up. So we heard all these stories, and you just kind of, I guess it just gets in your blood. You get on a four-wheeler or a dirt bike, and you get kind of a sense of speed, and it becomes something you want to do more. Yeah. And then I think so. Here in the first podcast, Kelly was talking around sometime like 1983 or something when you got out of high school. Yeah. So Rocky graduated in 89, so he was 18 and I was 13 at that point. So, you gotta harass your brother to take you cruising in Paintsville and whatnot. So I would every now and then get a ride out and go cruise with him, and we'd go out to the street races, and we just hang out. Man, it just became part of a culture here in Paintsville. It was just the scene,
Yeah, so. Yeah, no, for sure. Rock, you got anything to add?
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, when you said ride around with my brother and whatnot. So I knew Kelly, I knew the guys that raced out there, and when you're out there and you hear that name, and it always comes up, Kelly Conley, and you get to see that. So I got to see him race a bunch of people out there, and Bainey and all these other guys that's been out there, but could never really get into that. Just I had my first pickup, or my first truck was an S10 pickup, and you always want to try to make things faster. As Greg said, we race four-wheelers, we've done a lot of that stuff. How fast can you make a four-cylinder pickup compared to some of these other fast cars? So,
sure.
You see all that, and then you're like, that's what I want to do. So we've always been around it, kind of hung around it, and going to the races with my uncles and coming back from Clay City, as we talked a little bit earlier, you come by out there at 460, and there's all these people, there's all these cars, and there's a crowd, a mass, like 200 people standing on the side of the road. And we stopped, we watched some racing, and you're thinking, that's pretty cool. That outlaw aspect of the 460 drags and whatnot, it just kind of sets in that culture. You're not wanting to get out there and do something wrong, but it's intriguing to get out there and be a part of that.
Yeah. like you ain't out there trying to hurt nobody or do anything. It's just you didn't have no other place to go to do it.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, it was such and especially when you're young, you really didn't have the means to drive to Clay City or Lexington. I mean, this was right here in town, so you just, it became something we just did on a regular basis. I mean, it was the hangout. You went to the plaza and cruised. At 11 o'clock, you met at the Hannah Shammy-Shan, and there was a line of cars going to Kelly's.
Now, wait a minute. Now, where did you meet at now?
The Hannah Shammy-Shan.
Yeah. Okay, now where was this at? We never talked about this.
The car wash in the plaza.
It's still in the plaza. It's it was a drive-through car wash.
Yep.
So you'd ride around all night, talk to your friends, try to meet girls. At 11,
the hub right
at
there.
11 p.m., all the racers met at Hannah Shammy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
never heard that before.
Yeah, that's where we met up every time we wanted to race. And there'd be a line of cars, and whoever would come from Prestonsburg, McGoffin County, or Martin County, if you saw somebody in a Mustang or a Camaro, or
Hit 'em up.
you'd hit them up. Hey, you guys want to run tonight? We're going to Kelly's. And they go, yeah, what time? Like, all right, 11 o'clock, Hannah Shammy. And you made friends, you met people. I mean, we rode out, and we hung out, and all hours of the night. I mean, some nights it'd be 1 hour, and some nights it'd be 4 or 5, 3 or 4 in the morning. I mean,
Most definitely.
Depending on how many fish was out there.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So just anybody that was at the plaza that looked like they might be able to go fast, you'd be like, you want to go take them down there and see what you got? So
Sometimes they didn't have to look fast. They just had a noise.
Yeah.
Car thumped a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, what's under there?
Sweet sounding
Yeah.
exhaust or something, or they
And
come
when you're
through
first
rev
getting,
it. Yeah.
when you're first getting into cars, when you're 17, 18 years old, 19 years old, at that time, the small trucks, the lowriders, or the S10s kind of was a thing, and they weren't fast, but they were putting V6s in them that were 200 horsepower, give or take, and you'd run your buddy's Ranger, Sean Fraser, Beecher's son, always had a nice, clean 4.3 powered truck, and it was always lowered down. And we had another buddy that always had a Ranger, and we'd race V6 trucks, we'd race 4-cylinder trucks until we got old enough to buy cars that had V8s.
Power.
sure.
And it didn't have to be fast.
No,
Yeah, just as long as it was a playing field.
Right.
You had close to the same thing.
the first race that I ever participated in as a driver was at Kelly's Radiator Shop on 460. Rocky had graduated and had gotten a 4-cylinder, 4-speed S10.
Yeah.
And if it made 100 horse, it was all it made. But our buddy Daniel had another.
It run, though.
It run, and you could get in it and go.
Now,
Yeah.
I wasn't 16. I bet I was 14 or 15.
Probably.
And he let me race Daniel, 4-cylinder S10. But I mean, it was the first time. I was right there on that street at 460
That's
in front of the
perfect.
shop. I mean,
But that's how it grows. That's how it starts.
Yeah.
4-wheelers, 4-cylinder S10s or whatnot, and then you want to go faster.
Yeah.
You want to make something fast. You want to build something. You want to take that pride in building it. And you want to, hey, I want to take it out there and I want to show it off. I want to show everybody what it can do, and you're either going to win or you're going to lose.
You know what? The kids today, there's not one of them that will ever have the thrill of just twisting a wing nut off of a breather, and flipping it over just so you can hear that 4-barrel.
Absolutely.
They'll never get that. And that was big for us.
Them big quadrojets would really
Listen
suck
to
there.
that thing. Listen. You'd kick it and that 4-barrel would come in, you'd say, listen to that.
well, that's what we used to do. That's what we used to do on the trucks. And we'd swear, oh, man, it picked up 10 horse just flipping the breather. It had it faster. It probably did nothing. Probably slowed it down, but it made more noise.
If you had power steering, you'd go out there and cut a belt off of it. That's 7 horsepower.
Yeah.
You gained a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Oh,
Back
man.
in the day.
Well, and that's another thing, I wanted to talk about. Mike and I, after the last podcast, we were kind of standing around talking, and he did make a good point that, back in the 80s and even into the early 90s, a lot of the cars that were made in the 60s and 70s that were, big-time muscle cars or pretty fast, they weren't near as expensive as they are nowadays.
No.
You could go pick up a car that
absolutely.
stock was just an absolute unit. You know what I mean?
It was $3,000 for mine.
3,000.
69.
And for the 69, no, right? Okay, so for the Nova, you paid only $3,000.
It's $396, $375. Baddest thing I could get my hands on.
So if you
Buy
wanted
them
to,
all day long.
I was gonna say.
10 of them at a time.
I was going to say, if you wanted to find something like that today, you'd be hard pressed to find anything even remotely close to it.
Yes.
But that's what we were talking about earlier. Mike had made that point. He was like, back then it was accessible. He said you could go out and have some fun. Nowadays, I mean, what's a car price now? $40,000. You know, if you go pick one up
sure.
brand new. I mean, it's it gets to the point where it's a little expensive. But
Oh yeah.
you know, my point in saying that is back then you guys have a little bit more fun for a lot less money.
Oh Lord, yeah.
You know.
Yep.
And two, Rocky and Greg, I think there's an interesting thing here, and I'll tell you. Actually, Rocky, do me a favor. Take that microphone and just inch it just ever so slightly toward Greg. There you go. Perfect. Yeah. That way, whenever he's talking to Kelly, I can hear it a little bit better.
Okay.
All right. Now, what I was going to ask you boys, you guys have an interesting perspective because you said you were watching the 460 Street Racers when Kelly was doing it when you were younger. So, I mean, that just made you want to get out there and hit the track even harder, didn't it? I mean,
Absolutely. So we came up. I mean, Kelly's ego's big enough, but I mean these guys were they were legends. They
Exactly.
And we didn't know it.
Yeah.
We didn't.
I mean,
sure.
I was Kelly and I were talking earlier, and I told him, when I was 16 or 17, and we were in the plaza, and we hung out at Clay City with our uncle, and we hung out there on the street, and one of a fast Nova that we had seen at Clay City comes rolling in a trailer, and we of course we think we're street racers at that point, and we were asking them, hey, you guys here to race somebody? And they're like, yeah, we're here looking for Kelly Conley. We're like, oh, cool, we know where he's at. We'll take you right there. I mean,
So let's go.
yeah,
Let's
don't know
go.
if it ever happened or not, but I mean, we heard about these guys. You heard about some other guys. I mean, like Dean Harless and Joe and
Yeah.
Sam from J&S. We heard about these Grady Underwood. So
Yes.
Grady was kind of the transition. He was part of the older crowd, but he was still hanging out on the street with the young guys. I guess his wife was a little younger or whatever, so he was out there street racing, and Grady shows up with the brand new Mustang in '94, the new body style. And I mean, you see a guy like that, and he was kind of part of the old guard out there on the street racing scene. And we were all kind of, it was the fuel injection cars, the newer cars were kind of more on the scene then, and that's kind of what we were into. We grew up around the carbureted stuff and the old hot rods, but it wasn't our generation,
Sure.
so to speak. So, but it was you heard about that stuff, and you get to hang out with them, and you get to be a part of it. It just fuels the fire for what you wanting to spend money and wanting to go faster, and
Right.
that was our test track.
Yep, absolutely. And the tech, it's drastically changed. You go out now, just like we talk about some of the old cars, and you had a 396 Chevelle or a 396 Nova, and those were bad cars in the day. And nowadays, these cars come out with 500 and 600 and 700 horsepower,
Yeah.
and anybody can get in them, and anybody can drive them down the street. The technology's definitely changed things whenever you're out there street racing from what we all experienced. You
Yeah.
had to deal with, the road, how things hooked, how things moved. These new cars, they do it all for you. You hit a button, and if you want to go fast, you just hit the button, and it seems like you can
Traction
go fast.
control.
Traction
Yeah.
control, and
Launch control,
launch control, and some things like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
you take a little bit of that away, and that stuff's okay. But hands down, you can't experience that visceral feel of getting out there and just dropping the hammer on a big block car or a small
something
block
that
car
you
with a
can't
throttle.
control. Right.
Absolutely. You think you can in your mind, but you're going to do everything in your power to try to get that car down the track faster than the guy sitting right there next to you.
Yeah.
Now, when you had mentioned earlier that you kind of started off, you were kind of working on trucks and stuff like that whenever you first started. So, what was the first car that you remember, Greg and Rocky both? What was the first car that you guys remember ever buying to actually you were like, I'm going to race this car. That's going to be my car to take out on 460.
For me, it was an S10. Obviously, like I said, I had an S10, or Greg said I had an S10 when I first started driving. I remember I bought a Z28 Camaro. Thought it was the baddest thing ever, V8, until I come home and I started getting outrun by everybody. Just flat, everybody was handing me my hind end and getting outrun. And I thought, well, I'm going to go back to my roots. I bought another S10. Let's put a V8 in that S10. And for me, it's been an S10 all the way.
Yeah.
And I still got
Just
that
hooked you.
same truck. Still got my little black S10 now.
So
Awesome.
for me, it was a Mustang. I joined the Navy in '95, and first thing I did was 6 weeks in, as soon as I got out of boot camp, I went and bought a Mustang. Now that came from, my whole family were diehard Chevrolet guys. They were all, my grandfather was a Chevrolet mechanic, Mike was Chevrolet,
Yeah.
Rock, everybody. But there was a guy, local street racer, named Jeff Hobson, and Baney was talking about
Yeah.
he had to outrun him,
Yeah.
back in the day. But Jeff came out. He had this white '88 Mustang GT, and it had the black ARE wheels on it, the tinted windows, the sub.
Look good.
It looked
Yeah, it
good.
looked good. Good looking
And
car.
it had exhaust and a gear, and it had a little bit of nitrous on it. So Jeff would always come out in town. You'd see him cruising around. He had some pretty girl with him, And you're like, man, that's cool. I like that. It's got to be the car, you know, not Jeff. But, so I had to have a Mustang, and I watched Jeff. It was kind of the new old versus new. We were out at Joey Isaac's one night on 460, and a guy shows up in it's like a 78 or 79 Trans Am with like a 403, you know, carbureted, big motor kind of deal.
Bad old school
And
ride.
he wanted to run Jeff. So they got down there and back at Joey's, we all stood in the parking lot was the finish line.
Yeah.
So you got to see the cars come across the finish line opposite of Kelly's where you would
Use it to
use
take
that
off.
starting line.
Started 'em, yeah.
So we're all standing there, and the race kicks off, and you could hear, you hear the sounds, you hear the nitrous kick in on Jeff's car, and he's out in front of him, and everybody's kind of cheering, yeah, come on. And anybody that knows anything about nitrous knows that there's a little thing called a lean pop. So if you don't get enough fuel in it, or if you run lean,
You can hear it.
they backfire.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
It's a thunderous backfire. So right as Jeff came across the line, his car backfired. It blew the airbox off the car. Flames shot up out of the hood, and you see the girl. He had the girl in the
car with
him,
him.
and it blows up right in front of the crowd, and you see their
Lord.
faces light up, and the whole crowd's like, yeah,
Went crazy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I mean, it
No
was just
joke.
it was a boom, and pieces of the airbox and stuff scattered all over the road. It was, it was good, clean fun, but he still beat the guy.
Yeah.
And it was from that moment on, I'm like, I'm a Mustang guy. That's what I'm going to own.
So you knew that was for you?
I did.
Yeah. I got to tell a little story here too about Kelly. Like I said, we come into this when Kelly was still racing, and you want to talk about all the crowds cheering. We were out the radio shop one night, and it's kind of one of those things. Everybody wanted to race Kelly. Everybody wanted to come in. They wanted to beat the guy. And the Buick that he had, the Regal, he would, he'd get up there and he'd stage and he'd take off. And most all these cars, they would put one or two cars on him. And you'd hear the crowd, them guys, they'd go, yeah, they got him. And then about 600 feet out, Kelly would just drive right on by him, and then it would just break those guys' hearts. He'd just crush them, and then just a silence come over that group, and everybody else would be going, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was the days.
That was the days, yeah.
So Kelly had the sleeper, huh? Nobody.
Yeah, he was kind of like a wolf in sheep clothes.
Yeah. So we talked about that before.
Yeah.
Beecher had made that point talking about Kent Rose, and we'll talk about Kent here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But Beecher had made that point talking about Kent, and he said, was it Clay City? You said he brought just the absolute.
Yeah,
Was
was
that-
that S10 down there, and it scared me to death.
So that was us that was down there. It was me and you
Me
down
and
there.
you
that
had
night,
her
wasn't
back
it?
turned, and
That's
that
right.
the awfulest sound go down through there. It was. Kent Rose in a piece of junk. Take that thing home. Put it on the trailer and take her home, boys. Don't bring it back.
So it's good to know, I think it's interesting now because, there's a lot of people at the arm drops last year. I noticed there was a lot, there's people's cars that I think you may see and you just don't realize that they're as powerful as they are.
Oh, yeah.
I remember CJ Buckner drove Raggedy Ann, and we'll make sure we throw up a picture of CJ's car. But I remember seeing CJ's car, and I was like, and I don't know that much about the racing community. I think a lot of people have heard of CJ and been like, yeah, CJ's the man.
got it
You know what I mean? Yeah, right. And I remember seeing Raggedy Ann, and I was like, and I think that's kind of the whole premise behind it. Like, he doesn't want it to look like some big, because people had brand new Challengers out here that were loaded. I mean, just, tuned to bits, right? Yep. But he had this, I don't. What kind of car is Raggedy Ann?
It was a Mustang.
Is it a? Okay.
It
Yeah.
was. I don't think it's with us anymore.
Yeah. Well, see, so you guys know. Okay, so yeah, so
Yeah.
bad news
Is it
about.
LX?
Yeah, it was a LX coupe or hatch.
Yeah.
Hatch. I
Okay,
That was a
gotcha.
hatch.
So we'll make sure we throw up here. Unfortunately, CJ and them were racing a couple weeks ago, and they had some issues. But we'll make sure that there's a screenshot. They had posted a picture of the car, I believe. We'll make sure we throw that up. But as Greg was saying, I don't know if that car is with us quite anymore. But the point that I was trying to make was that you could drive whatever out here, and
yeah,
it did not matter. You didn't have to have the meanest, nicest, fastest. It just whatever would compete.
It wasn't really a car show.
Didn't have to
Right.
look pretty.
No.
Right.
You actually didn't want it to look fast.
It's almost deceptive, right? Like you'd
Yeah.
rather run somebody and them not know you had a fast car. It'd be
Yeah.
better if you was just running them. They're like, well, I'm gonna blow the doors off this feller,
Yeah.
and then you show them what's up.
Grocery getter.
Especially if it's for money. That's the
Sure.
That's the hustle is to
Right.
be deceptively fast.
Right.
So
Well, that's Mike was it Mike telling that story last time on the last podcast that was talking about it, or who was it that said I'm getting all my wires crossed. We got so many people on.
Oh, yeah,
now.
one of those racing for money.
Yeah, and so here 1 second. Oh, that is right. CJ did say that they're going to be ready for the arm drop, so they're making some moves. So They still got a couple months left still yet, but
That's awesome.
so we're hoping we see CJ and them back down here. But there's so many awesome cars that come out and come out of the arm drops, and that was something too. I was going to talk Greg and Rocky about you guys. So you guys are you did the 460 Street Racers as well, but then you also came up and raced at the Arm Drop Dragz.
Yeah.
So tell me, well, first let me not get ahead of myself here. So after the 460 Street Racing kind of died down, where did you guys go from there? Where did we go hit the track from there?
Well, Clay City was always our home track.
Okay.
But I joined the Navy in '95 and left.
Gotcha.
So I didn't. 460 became Blanding Boulevard in Jacksonville, Florida. It was we street raced. I mean, we didn't really. I really didn't start going to the track until and racing on the track. I enjoyed street racing
Sure.
for many years after there. Probably in the early 2000s is when I started going to the track.
Gotcha.
I actually ended up going to the School of Automotive Machinists in Houston, Texas, after I got out of the Navy, and they were very track oriented. They were NMRA, NMCA, so that's where I grew up on the track, but I didn't really have an affection for it until I went to school out there, and that's kind of where we spent our time. So.
Yeah. And about the same for me, living in Cincinnati. I was driving back and forth to come to 460 to come out here and race on the streets. In Cincinnati, there's a couple places we raced at. Obviously Edgewater, we would go to a couple local tracks, but I would say it was probably 2003, 2004, went strictly all track. And then when the Arm Drop Dragz come back, and I think that was in 2011, what a great opportunity to get back to your roots, to get back out there.
Go back home.
Go back home, have a little fun on the where we all kind of started at, out there on the road, compete with your buddies. And it was when we come back for that first race, it was a little bit different atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Come back and I had my truck. I think you had your car here, and now it's just so much more competitive, even at these races and these events. You've got Raggedy and you got cars like that
Yep.
are
You got Billy the Kid. I mean,
that
you
are
got
very
national names.
Yes, defined for that type of racing.
Sure.
We did it out there, like you said, for fun. It wasn't
Yes.
really betting all the time and for money. It was just the fun of seeing how fast you could go.
The
and whatnot.
adrenaline.
And the adrenaline of it, absolutely, yeah.
And the other podcasts that talk about some of the the law enforcement and stuff like that. So we were out there a lot, mostly in the '90s, and I don't know. I guess times change. Different officers. It was 50-50. We would be at Kelly's, and the state troopers would roll by. Sometimes they'd roll by, they'd blip the lights at you, and keep right on going.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Other times we've been in. I think I was 19 or 20, maybe 18, right before I went in the Navy. We were out in the parking lot, and they pulled up in there, and they got everybody in the parking lot. There was probably 50 people out there. They made us line up single file. Pull your ID out. And what they were doing, they were checking for people drinking, underage drinking.
Sure, right.
So
Yeah.
you had to come up, show them your license. They gave you a little sniff test, and if you were drinking, they put you in the car and took you away.
No joke.
Yeah. Called your
And
parents.
then, so they kind of left us alone more at Kelly's. When we went to Joey Isaac's, they started really cracking down over there.
Really?
And we'd have, there'd be 50, 100 cars over there on some nights, and they rolled in. I guess, you get a complaint, something like that. So they came in one night, and they threatened. They said they were bringing school buses back, like you guys had talked about.
Yeah. So when you said that echoes, because we
Yeah.
heard those same things when we were out there doing it too.
So
Yeah.
the next time, they basically said we're taking everybody into unlawful assembly, taking everybody to jail.
Yeah.
And so the next time we were out there, I guess they were calling our
serious about
bluff.
it, yeah.
So I had ridden out there with Rocky in his pickup truck, and Beecher's son Sean was out there with somebody.
Well, Sean was going to race my truck. We had set Sean up a race.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there. We was getting ready to pull out of the lot. So Sean was in the driver's seat, and I was in the passenger seat, and you must have been
I was standing there,
up the hill.
and the cops came, like 5 or 6 troopers pulled in there and swarmed the place. And of course, everybody just scatters.
Sure.
So I didn't have a ride. I mean, I was
Sitting
16. I was 16 or 17.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the truck's full. So I dove over the truck into the bed, and Sean just kicked it, and we
went back to
ran back to Paintsville, and
Yeah.
that was that.
Game
So
over.
yeah, we didn't go to jail, but I
Didn't
mean,
go to jail. Some did, but we
they
did.
harassed us. Like I said, sometimes they would, and sometimes they wouldn't. But they started really cracking down on it in the early '90s, '92, '93, '94 time frame. it seemed like out of Joey's more than Kelly's.
Yeah, more so.
But it wasn't really as organized
correct.
over
Right.
there.
Yeah.
There wasn't really nobody saying because Joey Isaac, he just owned the scrapyard, the junkyard,
Okay.
and he didn't get down there and do a whole lot of racing.
Yeah.
But they had a little machine shop there that ended up getting a lot of work from all the racers, you know.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't as organized.
So
It
now
wasn't
we're
like it wasn't like ours was organized. You had to sign a roster when you come in. And
Sure.
all that. No, it wasn't that. I'm just saying they kind of had. We had a few rules
right.
that you tried to go by on the Johnson County side, but now in McGoffin County boys, they didn't like rules.
They's a little more rough around the edges, huh?
So even back then, even in the early '90s and mid '90s, you know, when we would get ran off, I'm not going to use the word harassed. They were doing their job.
Sure,
But,
yeah.
You know, it was always the talk. It was like, man, where can we go race? Where can we? Clay City's too far. It's too far
Yeah.
for us.
Right.
Too far for a bunch of teenagers.
Yep.
Sure.
Where can we go race? And even then, people were like, the airport. If somebody could just get us on the airport, we'd stay off the roads. I mean,
Right.
so that wanting to be up here on the airport was as old, you know, that's 30 years ago. And I mean,
Really?
it was just once the thought of either getting your car taken or going to jail or something like that. I mean, you're like, okay, I need a safe place to
go.
I want to
Yeah.
enjoy myself. I don't want to have to run for my life every time I go out and try to have fun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Bell in
so
the back of a truck.
when we
Yeah.
heard, you know, that it was coming up, and when we heard the first one was coming up in 2011, it was like, yeah, we're
there. We're in.
We've wanted to do this since we were teenagers. We're coming. We're
We
going to
wanted
make
to run
sure.
on that spot anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Try
So-
that place out.
Now that's one thing. So how did you guys hear about the first arm drop race? Like, do you remember how you found? Was it just
Facebook.
is it Facebook? Okay, I
Saw,
was
saw
gonna
it on
Yeah.
Facebook, you know, because we obviously that's what Facebook was good for.
Sure.
Before Marketplace was was
go-to.
connected to people. You know, if you moved away from home or whatever, you stayed connected. So we still had friends up here, and when the first flyer came through Facebook, I called him and I'm like,
We're there.
we got to
We're
go.
going.
You know, he already had the truck was running. I had the Mustang, so
So at the time, were you still living in South Carolina then?
yeah, I've been in South Carolina since 2001.
Right. And then Rocky, you were in Cincinnati at that time. though.
Yes, correct. I've been
So-
up there since '94.
So this thing came out, and you guys were like, we got to get in the car and go.
Yeah,
Like,
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think we brought 3 cars from South Carolina the first time we came.
what'd you bring?
We brought a turbo Mustang, Fox body, small block turbo. We brought a LS1 Camaro turbocharged and a coupe Mustang, another small block turbo car. So we were kind of on the technology side. We've always been turbo guys. Or,
Okay.
Well, I say always. We got into turbos and we kind of never really went down the nitrous path. So.
Okay.
What'd you fellas call your group from down there?
Well, we had a shop. I had a speed shop in South Carolina back in 07 and 08. We had a chassis dyno. It was called Napalm Autosport. So we got on Kentucky Horsepower, and we were talking to Kent and a lot of these guys from up here, and they called us the Napalm Crew. That's how we kind of got dubbed, was the Napalm Crew. So
That's cool.
And in the videos, you'll hear guys like, you know, when I'm racing, like on some of those old videos, they're like, yeah, this is Napalm versus Tater or Napalm versus Billy or whatever it is. So, but I didn't give myself a title. It just happened.
It just naturally came to you. So, well, that's awesome, man. And, you know, Gina had made the point a minute ago. You were talking about we just want to come here and have fun, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's, as far as I've been able to tell, everything Gina's ever told me, that was Kent's biggest thing about why he wanted to bring the arm drops here, so people could be safe and have fun and not get ran off by the law. And real quick, as we always do in all of our podcasts, we need to make a quick disclaimer when we talk about running from the law, which these guys didn't say they had done anything like that, you know, unlike our friend Beecher over here.
Can't help you.
Built different, ain't you? Different breed, ain't you? Them Fraser boys.
Buddy, older generation.
And here's a fun story about the arm drop too. Well, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
You
you're
make
good.
the
Go ahead.
disclaimer.
Yeah.
It is, you know, it's not just there's a competitive side of this.
Sure.
It's all in good fun, but there's still a little bit of ego involved in racing.
Yeah.
So there, you know, I got my butt handed to me a few times out at on 460, and so the arm drop was kind of an opportunity to settle some old scores.
Sure.
So I'm sure you guys are familiar with Martin Conley.
Yeah.
So I used to race Martin Conley on the street. I've raced him at Kelly's. I've raced him at
bunch.
Joey's. And he just beat my doors in every time we raced. And I had him. I come back from the Navy one time. I was on vacation, and I bought this Z28. And I called him. He was, at the time, he had a Fox body. It was a stockish kind of Fox body. And it had nitrous on it. You know, Martin loved nitrous. And I said, man, let's run motor to motor. And he's like, all right, I'll turn the nitrous off. So we were this at the radiator shop. So we left out, and I had him about probably a car length. You know, just had a little faster car at the time, and I heard it. He plugged it in third gear, and it just, and I'm like, oh, here we go. And it just drove
I
off.
thought you wasn't going to use that.
Yeah, exactly. And there was no money involved. It was all
Right,
good fun,
right,
but you're still like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
So we get to the first arm drop, and you know, I thought that I had brought my big gun. You know,
Brought
I
your
had
A-game.
I had a 1,000 horsepower turbo Mustang. I was like, I got a good shot at
I'm
doing
good.
something. Yeah, I'm good. Martin shows up in that raggedy patchwork, you know, LX hatch they had that just was ridiculously fast. And it's on nitrous. I think they pulled the stick car. That was one that went famous on the internet for that big monster wheelie down at Clay
Yeah.
City. Well, they put a power glide in it, or some sort of an automatic, and they're, you know, to make it get down the street here. And I got to race Martin going into the finals. In the semifinals, we raced, and I got out on him, and then I heard it again. There come the nitrous. I mean, which, you know, it's fair this time. And I thought, I could see him coming up on my door, and I was like, just hold on. And I beat him by a fender.
No joke.
And I was like, man, you know, it was an amazing time for me because Martin's a winning, celebrated racer. He's raced in all kinds of formats and won.
He's decorated.
He's decorated. He's a veteran. But I got my one dub
One
at
win.
the arm drop that first year. That was so, you know, this whole, the arm drops and the Combs Airport and the 460. I mean, it's all tied together for the last
Absolutely.
30 years. You know, the same guys that were out there are the same guys that have been hanging out on this airport now.
Right.
Just our hair's a little whiter.
Yeah, right.
What's that?
I might still have some hair.
Yeah.
It's just turning gray.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Now, I know you said everything was all interconnected, but I mean, do you guys? I mean, either one of you or both of you. You know, we try to talk about Kent a lot of this because Kent's obviously he's a center point in a lot of these different conversations. A lot of people that we host on these podcasts knew him and, you know, knew of him really well. I mean, did you guys know Kent?
yeah. So when the first arm drop, when it started off, you know, like I said, everybody was kind of, the chat was kind of happening on the Kentucky Horsepower website.
Sure.
So I introduced myself to Kent. I told him I was from Paintsville. So when we came up here, I got to talk to him, and we became friends. Like, I never stopped talking to Kent, you know, from that point on. We would message on Facebook and stuff like that. I mean, I would comment on his posts and just try to stay up with the arm drop. We came, you know, we were up here for the first 2 or 3 years for every race.
Yeah.
So then, you know, life happens. You sell a car and you kind of do something else. So we've just kind of been without a heavy hitter car to come up here. So, but yeah, I talked to Ken. I mean, we became friends after the first race.
What's about the wildest Kent story you guys got?
I've got one for you. Let me tell this.
Yeah, let him tell
I was
us.
going to say now everybody's got one.
Everybody's
so.
got one, and I know Beecher. I think he talked about this a little bit about talking about Kent down at Clay City, and I was down there. I think it was Beecher, and was Mike with us? Beecher, I can't remember if
I
he
don't
was
know,
or
I
not.
think it's Sean.
We went down there to watch some racing or watch some testing, and we were there, and we were walking around, and I'd always heard Kent Rose's name associated with, you know, street racing and fast cars, and I just never met him. And we were walking around, and I seen this little S10 sitting there. And, you know, it was kind of like we talked about, maybe not the prettiest, but it was kind of purpose-built to go real fast and maybe kind of sucker some people in, and I didn't pay no attention to it. Walked on around, and then I heard something over there, like Beecher said, it was just making all kinds of noise. And I happened to look over there, and we walked up to the fence, and I'm like, oh, that's just that little S10. That's not going to do anything. And it got up there, and I'm telling you what, it pulled a big wheelie, rode a big wheelie out through there, and set it down. It went like deep in the 8s, and I'm thinking, mercy sakes alive, that's pretty bad. so I had a truck at the time. I had
And
my
you're an
little
S10
Sonoma,
guy
and I'm an
anyway.
S10 guy, and I'm like, I want that. So I still got that little S10, my little Sonoma, and you know, I don't do wheelies like that, but that kind of set the tone for when I, you know, kind of introduced to Kent. Outlaw, baby, all the way, give it to it, stand on it, you know?
Yeah.
So it for me kind of was a good deal. Then to get to meet him at the Arm Drop and talk to him and everything, it's just been a good experience.
And again, I guess maybe I'm beating the dead horse, but so he's had that truck since '97.
Sure.
Somewhere in 96 or 97.
So I was in the Navy, and I came home from cruise in '98, and him and my Uncle Mike had built this 383 stroker for it, built a nice engine and everything.
Because of the big wheelie that Kent was doing, I'm like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Some way, somehow.
It was, you know how these things are. The longer you keep them, the more things change. I mean, so he lived in an apartment at the time and didn't have a garage or whatever, and he ended up selling the truck to our uncle, and it came back to Paintsville.
Yep.
And sold the big motor first.
Yep.
Sold the big motor out of it. Didn't have a garage to work on. You know, you're young. You got money to buy it, but you don't have a house or a garage or anything. So, Mike took it, and Mike was a bracket racer. He was a diehard bracket racer, and they would if they heard a motor, whatever was sitting on the property that they could pull a motor out of, they would. If
put it
was
in
a van or an old pickup truck, they'd pull a 350 out. So he wrangled up a 350 and a set of 283, they call them power pack heads. Before my time, you probably know what those are.
Yeah,
They're
I give them to
little tight peanut, you know. So this thing, we put it together, and then Rocky decided that, it was running again. He decided,
I want it back.
I can't live without it. So he had to have it back. So I come home. I think I come home from the Navy, and then we'd put nitrous on it. It had a 308 gear, and it's little junky 350 in it. It ran 1305 or something like that at Clay City on the motor.
Yeah.
But on the gas, with
Different
that
story.
with that 308, it run 1190s.
Yeah.
It was okay. So this was towards, like I said, later in the 90s, and the 460 scene had kind of started to dwindle.
Yeah.
You go out there, we'd ride out there, and there wouldn't be anybody at the radiator shop, and then we'd go on over, and there might be 5 or 6 cars at Joey's. So that happened. I was home, and he was like, "Man, let's go see if we can find a race tonight."
Yeah.
We go out there, and there was 8 cars in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And we just started asking people, "Hey man, you want to run?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah." So he started off, and he raced like 3 or 4 of them
Yeah.
back to back, just pull in there, cool it off 5 minutes, and race them. And I said, "Man, I want to run somebody." So I got in the truck, and I raced the other 4 cars. We raced everybody in the parking lot that night in that truck. It was 8 cars.
That was some of it because I'd won like 3 or 4 of them, and they're like, "Oh no, well let me put a different driver in there."
Yeah.
Let my little brother drive it, and then if you want to race,
Well,
so
let him run it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
he run the other 3 or 4 in the parking lot.
Yeah, and
Because a
we-
lot of times people will, like I said before, the driver, you have 2 or 3 different cars, and one won't be that fast, but you put somebody in there that
Yeah.
can make it hook to the ground or make it go, so then people won't be afraid of a different guy.
Sure.
Oh, his little brother's going to get in it.
Yeah.
We can outrun him.
Yeah, we'll outrun him. Yeah.
No. So that's what they ended up.
Yeah, it was a great night, man. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just it was like that. I mean, it was just you never knew what you were going to run into out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you never.
Yeah.
It was fun.
He'd race people he's raced people when he had the big motor in it. He'd race people at Kelly's, and they wouldn't even pull back in the parking lot.
Shame.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Humiliation
Back
is what
home.
you call that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we were talking a minute ago, guys. In a second, I do want to ask you, because we've heard about Hard Times Kestner, and we've heard about Easy, and we've heard Beecher Frazier, and all these names have been thrown around. So, would you guys said something about Mike Smith earlier? Can you guys maybe elaborate a little bit more on Mike?
So
Sure.
go ahead.
Uncle Mike. He.
Yeah.
He's a mechanic. That's where I really learned everything that I know about cars from. When I was away from here and working, I would work on things and whatnot every time I'd come home. And if we were building a motor, if we were working on something, he would get down there and he'd show me what to do, help me get that done, and kind of the inspiration to kind of want to go fast, and kind of learn that concept of just not going out and paying somebody to maybe do the work for you.
He was a
Learn how
mentor.
it's doing. Yes,
He was.
absolutely.
He was. Everybody kind of looked at him because he had that garage,
Yep.
and he dealt with some go-fast cars. so
Absolutely. Had some
usually
go-fast cars, yes. And I can attest
They looked
to
up
this.
to him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Looked up to him, and I can attest to this when it comes to that old school stuff,
Oh, yeah.
the big blocks and the small blocks and how to make them run and what parts to put on to make them run.
No technology
Right,
involved.
no
Yeah.
technology involved. But I can't work on a carburetor that well. I can understand how the concept works, and I can make them run.
He can.
He can, though, mister, like nobody's business. And Beecher's got that old Nova that's been sitting around for how long, Beecher? What, 8 years this time before it been started?
8 years.
Walked out there, checked a few things, hit the key, and it fired right up. And Mike rebuilt that carb for him several years ago.
Yeah.
So where was Mike's shop at?
It was beside his house.
A little 2-car garage out by the house.
Not far from me.
I was going to say, what
Yeah,
I thought they said earlier it was out near you.
Springs. He worked for a lumber company in town,
FS Fan House.
and then he would wrench and build hot rods in the evenings and weekends, and then
Yeah.
raced on the weekends and stuff like that. So
I have to blame him for some of our hot rod addiction. I mean, between him and my Uncle Randy, on one uncle on each side of the family, both of them into cars, both of them raced a lot, and then we would tag along down to the racetrack with them and kind of
Get the fever.
that bug,
Yeah.
get that fever, and kind of pushing us towards some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
I'm not saying we didn't get in trouble, but it probably kept us out of
it probably
more
kept us out
trouble,
of some other troubles.
Yeah.
Clean troubles.
It was,
Sure.
and that's what we felt like, when we were racing, like when we were out on 460 at the, whatever, we weren't out there. It wasn't a party. You weren't out there, so you didn't mind. I mean, like if the cops came and they were looking for people that were underage drinking, and they weren't really messing with the guys racing as long as they were being kind of respectful and whatnot. I mean, that's what you were there for. You were there to race and to have fun. I mean,
You didn't want to do nothing to get run off.
No.
Right.
You wanted to
Exactly.
stay there.
Right.
Well, I'd rather seen my son get killed out there playing on the road like that as to OD'd.
Yeah.
That's the way I've seen it.
I know that anytime somebody had a problem with something and they couldn't make it run, they'd go to Mike Smith.
Yes,
Bottom
yeah.
line. And,
even
and
the best.
I got to tell a funny story on Mike. So, obviously,
got one.
with me buying this truck and everything, so the black truck that I own, I bought from my Uncle Randy.
Yeah.
So it was in the family, and when I decided to put a big motor in it, after being out there and seeing you and seeing everybody else out there go fast, I want to do that. We built a big motor for it. Mike put it in. I was coming back and forth from Cincinnati, and we was up there in the garage. We had it all started up and everything, and it was great. And he was like, well, we need to go for a test drive. And I'm like, okay, where are we going to go? He said, well, right down here in front of the house. You know where the house is at, right in front. So we pulled down there in front of the house. And I was standing there. I'm like, well, you guys go ahead, or Mike, you go ahead and drive it. I want to watch. Well, let's see if we'll do a burnout. So big burnout, let her go and kind of come down through the road there. Well, it was the pavement. These old country back roads, sometimes the pavement gets a little out of whack.
Yeah.
She kind of fell over in a low spot. Well, it turned the truck sideways, and he was probably running 50 or 60 right through the front yard, right up towards the house and
Our
everything.
grandmother and mom watching,
Everybody
all
out there
them,
watching the big spectacle, and just as calm as could be. Mike went through a couple trees and popped out up on top of the hill and hopped out and said, hey, guys, how was that? And everybody up there like, oh, my gosh.
Well, he just made all that noise doing the
Yeah.
burnout, so then everybody runs to look, and here he
Goes
shows
through
them.
the yard, yes.
And so going back to Mike, my story is I was telling Kelly earlier. You talked about nitrous a lot. Well, when he first got into it, he didn't do his research.
Sure.
So he had this Hugger Orange 69 Chevelle 396 automatic, and it was 456 geared. It was an old hot rod. So he put nitrous on it, and he thought that you could just hit the button and it would work like an accelerator pedal. Well, he didn't have you have to have the throttle down. So he hits the button and it detonates like we talked about. The nitrous backfire. It destroyed the motor, broke all 8 pistons in the motor. So I was 12. I was 12 when this happened. So this was 88. So he pulls the motor, rebuilds it, gets everything fixed, and me and Rocky were out there hanging out in the garage like we always did.
Yep.
He said, hey, you boys want to go for a ride in the Chevelle? I'm
Oh,
like,
my gosh.
absolutely. So we come out of the little raggedy hauler onto the big road, so to speak, and in the middle of a curve going uphill, Mike flat foots it and lays the nitrous to it. I'm in the back seat, 12 years old. I go flopping around like a rag doll. Rocky's up there holding on for dear life. And you got to know Mike. He's just this old hot rodder. And he always had a cigarette. Always had a cigarette in his hand.
Calm,
And
cool.
man, he would have that cigarette hanging there, and he'd be driving, did the car doing all. He's just calm as he could be, and we're back there fighting for our lives.
Oh, my God.
But that kind of stuff right there, man, that's what led us. We have to have a hot rod. You have to
After doing that, if my mother knew about it, rest her soul, she would probably have skinned his hind end, but that was part of it, you know.
And I swear, now this may be an exaggeration, but this time I think I was 14 or 15. He was working on another Chevelle for my Uncle Randy, and big block 4-speed car, 68 or 69. And I swear, man, it happened so fast, but we go up the road and he just mashes it, and this thing just starts dancing between the ditches. It's a little country road with no lines on it, and it's dancing all over the road. And I swear, man, in my mind, I remember it that it's in second gear, and he mashes it, and the car's going all over, and he takes a puff off the cigarette, reaches down and slaps it in the third gear. And I'm over there like thinking I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Like, this is
He's worried about the cigarette.
And it just wasn't no big deal.
exactly. I mean, it was. But you you talk about like when you're young, when you grow up in this area, that's the kind of stuff that makes these guys, these ones that came before us, kind of have that little bit bigger than life kind of status, and it was like, oh, these guys, I got to do that stuff. They're having fun. So I mean, that's how it all happened. That's how it all started. Getting out there on the street. As soon as we were old enough to drive, it was 4-cylinders, but it evolved into.
It was clean fun.
It was fun.
And,
Absolutely.
And like you were saying there, Greg, it's interesting because a lot of these people, they build reputations, right? Mm-hmm. And because I remember, I asked Kelly, I said, when's the first time you met Beecher? And he's like, well, I'd heard about Beecher for years, and it never actually met him. And then the same thing with Beecher. Beecher had heard a bunch of stories about Kelly, and I remember I said, well, Beecher, what'd you think the first time that you ever laid eyes on Kelly in real life? And he was like, well, there he is. It was like they had built up this persona of him and stuff. And, we've heard all these. I mean, now I'm dying to meet Easy. There's so many people now that I want to meet just because we've heard the races and stuff. So that kind of brings me back to one of the questions I have for you guys. Whenever you guys were real heavy in 460 street racing, like I said, Kelly and them had kind of moved on and were doing other things. So who were some of the bigger names that you guys had, back then?
So we had a local crew. Like we had a local group of guys that I guess were from the Paintsville area. So we hung out in the plaza every weekend. Yeah. So if we went out there and there wasn't a big group, like we'd all race each other. But I guess maybe the heavy hitter, so to speak, was Jeff Hobson.
Jeff Hobson, yeah, sure.
A guy named Don Hatfield always had kind of hopped up
Fast
Mustangs
cars.
on nitrous.
Sean Frazier.
Sean Frazier.
Fast cars, fast trucks. We all used to race a lot. And a lot of that was, as Kelly mentioned, I heard that before, a lot of times people come from other towns. You don't necessarily know who they are, but they got a fast car and they want to race.
Well, you've heard it.
And you heard them. They made it perfectly clear that I come over here to race. And there was some fellas from Martin County, I believe, that come down.
Martin Conley.
Yeah, right. They would come down, some guys from Floyd County. And you don't necessarily remember their names, but you remember their cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cars become as much of a legend as the guy driving
it.
In most cases.
I
mean, that White Regal dude is
it's legendary. Yeah.
People talked about it for years. I mean,
like he talked earlier there about nitrous and turbos. Until them Curry boys come in town with those turbo cars, there was no turbo cars in Paintsville around us. Them boys come in there, which I was just pumping nitrous. I didn't have no turbo car. Them boys was cleaning house with a little old turbo on a 6-cylinder, and I got to have me one of them. So when I get one, I thought, well, hey, this is the perfect thing. That turbo and nitrous, hey.
Good combination.
It works. It did. It worked for me.
It worked very well, yeah.
And it's also, you got to look back at what Paintsville was. Like, what was going on in here? This place was just kind of crazy in the 80s and 90s. I mean, there was just so much activity, and I guess what I've been told is that there was a coal boom. There was, coal was big. People were making money. They were trucking and driving and mining, and there were jobs and money. But I mean, you look at the social scene out there, which evolved in or translated into the street race scene, but just the cars too. How many Grand Nationals and Cyclones and
Turbo TAs,
Turbo Trans Ams. I mean, those cars were rare as hen's teeth now. There were 1,500 of them made. I mean, there were multiples of those cars in this little town, and a lot of it was driven by what was going on 460. A lot of it was driven.
Radiator shop.
Yeah.
Well, at that time, like he said, for me, I just happened to be in the line of work that was related to coal. And when coal started booming, all them pieces of equipment, they had a radiator on them.
Yep.
Everything.
So then that just made faster cars.
You know, that's an interesting thing that you say that tech for the era, the turbo Buicks and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
I almost would have liked to have been around in the late 60s and the 70s, kind of like Beecher's era. The muscle, the big block stuff. I mean, it's just a different
Raw muscle,
experience.
all you can say.
Yeah, and those cars are running around, and you can't hardly find them cars anymore out. When's the last time you seen somebody driving a big block Nova or a big block Chevelle or a big block Camaro out, just driving it around? You don't
Well,
see
they're
that.
slow. They ain't even in competition today.
So that was, for me, the modern cars, the fuel injection was my era. That's my 57 Chevy, the Mustangs, Camaros of that time frame. But, you know, so I went into that. I got into that, and you know, it's racing. You got to have a little bit of ego to want to race. But that was part of the drive for me was I like to take I call it a little junky Mustang, you know, with these little small blocks with the tech, with the turbos and the aftermarket fuel injection. And I always got a good kick out of outrunning those older cars, those big
I
blocks.
still got it.
The ones my uncle was like, oh, these big, nothing outruns a big block. And I'm like, I can, you know. I mean,
It took something to outrun them big
Oh,
blocks.
it did.
It
They
did.
come out, buddy.
Yeah,
and
torque
we
mister.
had a thing
It
of the
was a
past.
torque monster.
Torque.
And look, man, the big block Chevy is still the fundamental part of drag racing today. I mean, it's
Yeah.
you know, the same architecture and stuff they've had for 60 or 70 years is
Yeah.
still some of the fastest cars on the
Yeah.
planet. So, they
And the
just
sound.
have big turbos on them.
Yeah.
Now, guys, you know, we were talking earlier about you guys, you know, coming up to Combs and being at the first race. You know, can you talk a little bit about you guys raced multiple times up here, right?
Yes.
At the Arm Drops. So, were you guys at the Arm Drops last year?
Yes.
You were okay. So well, awesome.
Spectating, we weren't racing.
Yeah, we were
but
spectating.
Okay,
We're
okay.
racing this year.
That's what I was going to ask.
Absolutely.
We got it coming up here in a few months.
So,
What are you gonna have? Well, do you want to say? But
yeah, sure. Let me give you just a little history quick.
Yeah.
The first race we came up, and we came in second to Butch Reed.
Okay.
Who he won the small tire class or drag radial at that point. That was with my car, and my buddy's car, the coupe. We brought it back for the second race, and we ended up winning the small tire class. We beat Butch. It was foggy that night. That was the time it rained, and they were running up down the track trying to get it dried out.
Yep.
It got foggy on us that night, and we got out in front of Butch, and he got into it a little too hard, and he spun. He didn't just spin; he spun the car around in
Over to
donuts
the infield,
across the track into the grass, and it was a little sketchy at the you know, but and so we run it up the first one, we won the second one, and we've come back another 2 or 3 times, blew a couple cars up, you know, stuff like that. But so my current car, my current Mustang is more of just a driver. I had kind of stepped back from drag racing for a little bit, but
I'm going to bring the Sonoma. We're going to race it in a couple classes probably. Not sure how well we're going to do, but we're going to bring it. We're going to have a good time, and we're working on another Corvette. We're going to try to bring it as well if we can get it done in time. So we're going to try to have 2 cars here.
good.
This year.
yeah, so he's got a small block turbocharged Sonoma, and then we have a C4 Corvette that's been, I don't know if you ever heard of a vet cart, but it's been completely stripped, so there's no body on it.
Oh yeah.
It's like a go-kart with a roll cage.
Yeah.
So we've got one that's probably 60%, 70% complete.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try to thrash on it, and we're gonna try to bring 2 cars at least. 1 for sure, but 2
Hopefully.
if we make it on the second one.
Hopefully too.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Hopefully 2.
Awesome. Because that's what I was, you know, a lot of this stuff, man, like I said, we're trying to reconnect a lot of these people that were racing back at 460. So, I mean, is there anybody that you guys ran with back in the day that you've been like, hey, you got to come up to the Arm Drops? It's happening here in a couple months.
Jeff Hobson,
Jeff, love to
He's
see
gotta be
Jeff
here.
Hobson up there. That would be cool.
Jason Stewart, he's got to be up here.
I
Oh,
seen
yeah,
him
I forgot about
yesterday.
Jay.
What about-
Buying paint and Lowe's.
Yeah, yeah,
I forgot about him.
Grady Underwood.
Yeah.
I mean,
Grady Underwood.
Grady was here last year. He was
Yeah.
running, so
yeah.
he needs to be there. I mean,
Ricky Duncan, he's got to be here. He was
Yeah.
here last year.
Okay.
Had
He
a
was
good
at the
car
first
with him,
one.
and he was at several of the first races. He needs to be here.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of the cars coming from Cincinnati. I know Jason Terrell, he kind of helped with the last event.
Right.
So he will be bringing, some of the crew from up in Cincinnati. They got some bad rides up there. So,
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, have to bring those guys.
Awesome, man. Yeah. I mean, like I said, we're looking forward to it. Hopefully this year we've already had a ton of pre-registrations.
Great.
We've not told anybody who's been pre-registering for what because we don't want to scare nobody off. I didn't realize it was that. Gina had told me, she was like, "Listen, we can't tell nobody who's coming up here," and I was like, "Why not?" And she said, "Well, if some people hear somebody's coming, they just won't show up."
They may not come. Yeah, that's
And-
right.
Say, well, he's going to walk off with it.
Because those reputations,
Yes.
everyone else in the car speaks louder than that, so.
And that's what we were talking about because we were like, "But you would never believe." How many upsets you can get because you never know what could happen to your car from race to race.
Absolutely.
And that's
Anything can happen.
that's like last year. And I can't speak to the specifics of what happened to the Hoskinsons last year, but they had their issue with their Nova right before the final race of the night.
Yep.
And so it doesn't really matter. That's what she was saying. She was like, we don't want to ever deter anybody from coming to the arm drops because you never know what'll happen.
Exactly.
Well, and that's the allure of obviously no prep racing has gotten very big over the last few years, but street racing, that was always the big allure with street racing is that you have to drive the car. You still have to race the surface.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And it's a tricky surface. That's what you come here for is to
It
it's
equalizes
still-
a lot.
It
sure
does.
does.
It's still a skills test.
And that's what a lot of people talk about with this specific run of road out here on Combs Airport.
Yeah.
That they've said that it does not matter that out here it's the driver.
It's popcorn asphalt.
Right.
Let me tell you a good story about thinking that you've got something that you don't. We had another truck, another S10 that Mike built, a little bit different setup and everything, and ran pretty good. We thought it was on nitrous, thought it ran real good.
Yeah.
So Greg and I was home one weekend. We were like, well, let's just go test it out on the street, and picked the baddest guy in the lot, thinking, no problem, we got him. Well, after 4 or 5 races and losing.
$20 a
Little
race.
bit
He
of
took
money.
$100, although
Yeah.
it's just like
Just-
that.
just
Talking
like
about
that,
going
was
up
like,
Little Mexico.
That's enough for us. So
We're done.
Did you ever hear
So-
of Little Mexico?
you go
That's
in
the new
thinking that you
airport.
got it covered
They
up,
go up on
and
the race,
sometimes it just
outlaw
don't work
race
out
all
that
day.
way. So
So Rocky run up against a big old Trans Am.
Trans Am, yeah.
No joke.
And
there's-
whoever Grady drives for, who's he drive for? Lawfer.
Lawfer.
And the fellow that builds Lawfer's cars was been a mechanic on the Trans Am.
Really?
So it's bad news.
No joke.
So,
Bad news.
Rocky got beat the first time, and I thought, Rocky, you jumped it. You keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. He said, I can outrun him. What, $20 more?
My spotter here was like, "You think we can get him?" Yeah, let's go. So we went 3 or 4 or 5 times. So
It's just $20 every time.
But it
No.
was fun.
it was fun.
We had a
Absolutely,
great time.
absolutely.
Now that's what I was going to ask. So Beecher, these guys were saying just before the podcast, I was talking to them just a minute. They had said they've known you for over 20 years now.
Well, Rocky's my son-in-law. I've had him for 20 years.
Well, you got any good stories on? You want to tell?
No.
No.
He
said
married my daughter. My daughter'd bitch at me.
He said I ain't got one good story to say.
Well, no, how did I got up with Rocky now? He'd always wanted to date my daughter, and Sean, my boy, he said, no, you ain't dating her. You ain't dating her. And my mother died in 03, I guess it was. Is that about the time you married in 03, the end of it?
3, yes.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, she died in May of 03, and me and my daughter were sitting there at the house one Saturday night, and she didn't have a date. She was griping because she didn't have a date. And I said, well, what about Rocky? There you go. So got me a son-in-law,
Yeah, dog.
So
and he likes cars, so I was well pleased.
He
with
was
him.
he was okay.
I've got a funny story because everything, like you said, when you're around all that, you think cars, you talk cars.
Sure.
I'd called and asked Rebecca out. We set up a date, and I had a blue Z28 that I bought off Aunt Blair's son.
Oh,
And-
yeah.
Matthew, yeah. And I was out there at Mike's working. We were doing something to it, trying to make it faster, and couldn't get my car done, so I had to call Rebecca and say, hey, I can't make the date tonight.
Yeah, stood her up
So
first
because
time.
of a car.
Yeah.
So, 3 months later, after trying to get her to go out on a date, she finally did, and the rest is history per se. And she does put up with the hobby, so
Now,
give her a little
Well,
props.
she knew that when she
She-
married
yeah,
you.
she knew it going in.
That's
She had a hot rodder as a dad, a hot rodder as a brother, drag racer, and now she's got a hot rodder drag racer as a husband. So
Yeah.
now she's been down the track a few times.
Oh,
She's,
yeah,
she's
yeah.
tried.
she's raced a little bit. Yeah, she
May or may not have bounced one off the rev limiter for a few seconds.
may have not blowed 1 or 2 of them up.
It's hard to say,
But
but-
she Yeah, she's been down the track a couple
She can do
times.
it.
Yeah, she can do it. Yeah.
I never did try to teach her. I always taught Sean.
Yeah.
Well,
She knows how to have fun.
Exactly.
that's the important thing. Well, now, guys, I mean, I hate to end. Man, we've been having a good old time here. I ain't even had to ask too many questions. You guys just been telling the stories.
Man.
I love it.
You just gotta turn me loose.
No, it
Once
works
you get it
out.
rolling, it go.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask, boys. I mean, we're going to wrap things up here for just a minute. I mean, y'all got anything else you want to add? And just toward the end here. I mean, anybody?
Man, I just want to encourage people. If you're thinking about coming up here, don't worry about who's coming or what. Just come up here and have fun. And
Absolutely.
support local tourism and a local event. I mean, it's a great time. The big wheel race for the kids. I mean, it's a great thing. It's a great foundation. It's even if you're just up here and you're going to lose, come up here and have fun.
Even if you want to come up here to spectate,
Yeah, come
it's a
spectate.
great
Come
time.
run. I mean,
It's a
Watch
better
these cars
event
go
than
down
what
the
people can
track.
think that it is.
Watch
there's
those
not
big
much
wheels
better
go down
going
the
on in
track.
Eastern Kentucky. I mean,
Nothing.
and I mean, it's not just it's not good for Eastern Kentucky. It's good no matter where it's at. It's a good event. It's just
Yep.
fun.
And you
it's
can't beat the
competitive.
smell,
Yeah, right. The sights and the smells and the sounds.
the fuel,
Nothing
the
like
rubber.
it. Yeah.
It's so funny. I'll say this. I have no recollection of Kent Rose. Ever, I never, like I said, I've never been around this scene, but I've been a photographer for, gosh, half my life now, over half my life. And I remember whenever they were doing the races down at the Riverfield in Pikeville, they would do them down there right next to
Yeah.
movie theaters, And I remember one time I was downtown and I remember seeing everybody lined up along because they had built concrete bleachers into the hillside over there.
Yeah.
And I remember one night I was out, and I mean, there was the ungodliest amount of people down there just watching on the weekends. And I remember one time I said, I'm going to go down there and take some pictures of these boys. And I'm still, to this day, I'm still searching around trying to find some archival footage or some photos of Kent that I took way back in the day. But you mentioned the smell.
Oh yeah.
It was the craziest thing because, like I said, I had never been, to one of these races other than that one time. We was about a half hour in to the races last year, and I was like, yep, I remember this. It was like flooded back to me, you know what I mean? So, and that's another thing, too. We were talking a minute ago about you boys growing up around this kind of stuff. We had a conversation here, all of us, a minute ago off of the podcast, off the cameras and everything, that for the people in this area, a lot of what the Kent Rose Foundation does and a lot of what we want to do here and a lot of what the mission that Gina and her team and everybody that she works with is trying to bring to life here is making sure that kids have a safe and a fun outlet to be able to go have fun and not do anything dangerous or do anything, off color, anything like that. They can come here to this, have a good time, do the big wheel race. I mean, watch the races. There's food. It's very much a family oriented event, and you can bring anybody with you, and they'll enjoy it. I really could not tell last year. There wasn't a single person here, and it 100 degrees outside, just getting beat by the pavement out there. It was as hot as it could be.
Yeah.
And everybody out there was wearing a smile on their face. It was an absolute phenomenal time. So, Beecher, you got anything to throw on the end of
Ain't
this?
nothing like burnt rubber and a high octane gas.
Yeah.
No, if you can't get high on that, you can't get high.
Yeah. That's right.
See, now we got to clip that one. That's a good one right there. That's the motto.
That's
So,
it. I mean, that's just how it is.
There you go.
That's a thrill of a lifetime, buddy. You know how. I won't say, but
The
you know,
smell.
you've had some good times in your life, but that beats anything
that
you've
beats
ever
anything.
had.
All right, good.
You
All
can,
right.
It's something you can take home and tell somebody about it.
There you go. Well, Kelly, you got anything to
No, sir.
end us off with?
Had a
All right.
blast.
Well, Greg, Rocky, guys, appreciate y'all coming on and hanging out with us, man. You guys are
Absolutely, yep.
awesome for coming up. Great hearing your stories. Can't wait to see you at the Arm Drops.
We're not legends, man. We're just happy to be here.
Well, we'll call you heroes if you don't want to call yourselves legends anyway. So we'll have a good time with it. But guys, listen, just one quick reminder. We've been talking about it for the past couple podcasts. We're going to continue to talk about it on this one. I swear to you, you're going to hear it on the next ones too. Don't forget to come down to Combs Airport on August 30th and 31st, Labor Day weekend. We are going to be having an absolute shindig. If Beecher shows up, he's going to make sure you have a good time, if not for anything else. So, guys, be sure to come out to the race. It's going to be an absolute excellent time. We plan on seeing Rocky. We plan on seeing Greg. We know we're going to see Kelly. Bainey already took off here today. We've been sitting here having a good time down at Combs Airport, just sitting around reminiscing. But be sure you come out and check it out. It's going to be 2 days of absolute, what can we call it? Pandemonium. Yeah.
And bring your
Pandemonium.
nose.
Yeah, bring your nose. That's it.
The only thing I'd like to add to that,
Go for it.
I'd like to have a little bit of air conditioner. If there's any possible way,
Well-
because I'm a surviving cancer right
Yeah,
now. And I ain't really surviving. I'm still waiting on another round of chemo.
I got you.
So,
Yeah.
I'd really appreciate if there's any possible way I could get a little cool air.
We'll make sure we get you as
or a
comfortable as we
tent
can.
or something. I
cool
can
one.
sit
Yeah,
close.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I mean, that's just how
Oh,
it
no,
is.
no. We
That
want you.
way I can be here anyway.
We'll accommodate you.
Last year I was right in the middle of chemo when this was going
Oh,
on.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. But no, like I said, hopefully we see Beecher down here, you know, God willing, and he's feeling good enough to come down and hang out with us. It's going to be a good time. But once again, Rocky, Greg, appreciate you boys driving up and hanging out with us
Thank you.
this evening. Kelly, appreciate your time. Beecher,
Glad
you're the
to
man.
be here, buddy.
Yes, sir. All right. Well,
I'll
guys.
be here as long as I'm able.
That's it right there. Well, guys, once again, appreciate you tuning in and hanging out with us for episode 4 of the 460 Street Racers Heroes and Legends podcast. We're looking to get a couple more lined up for you, so be sure to keep an eye out for it. We're here in a couple weeks. We're going to be filming the newer. I don't want to say newer. I guess that's probably not the right word for it, but the racers that have been out here on Combs more specifically than anything else that weren't part of the 460 Street
Newer
Racers.
generation.
Yeah, there you go. The newer generation. That works out just perfect. So we're going to make sure we get those guys on camera, and we're going to hear their stories just like we just heard Greg and Rocky's and all the Kelly stories and all the Beecher stories and all the Bainey Blair stories.
Yeah.
So be sure to tune in for those. And I think that's all we got for you today. So appreciate you once again for coming out and hanging out with us. Catch you back on the next one. We'll see you.